very soft, very casual about many of these things. Take the British definition. It does not matter what intent you have. It does not matter whether there's actually a murder and mayhem. The intent to create that, or anything that might endanger public safety, even by an economic offense, even by, you know, disrupting the software and the computer network in the country, is then if it's an act of terror. So no, we are very deficient in many respects.
We are very deficient in those respects, but it's almost time for a short break over here. I would like to really stop you here, but after the break we'll be talking about the definition of terrorism that has obviously changed after the 9/11 blast in USA. In fact, it's also important, as Dr. Narayan also mentioned, a week is a big time when it comes to politics. Now that's a time thing. We'll be talking about the efficiency of the system also, but all that after the break. Welcome back after the break. Well, we are talking about a new anti-terror strategy. Well, let us look at a little bit of the history of terrorism. It became an accepted tactic of the insurgents, particularly in the last 2 decades of the 20th century. Insurgencies throughout the developing world made use of terror tactics. The LTTE, ULFA, NSCN, Hizbul Mujahideen, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and the list goes on. Transnational character of these groups and easy availability of small and light weapons have made them more dangerous and deadly. Right, so there has been a drastic change, in fact, in the entire definition of terrorism also after the 9/11 blasters. We were talking about, in fact, before going to the break, there's a term called global terrorism which has actually gained that more thrust because it's the superpower USA we're talking about. But most interestingly, when you talk about homeland security and them implementing it, has it really helped US also? I'll come to you, Mr. Parikh. Has it really helped US also to actually avoid those further attacks?
The basic thing is, and I'll just comment on what was said just before the break, that mens rea is something which has been given up in other countries. Mens rea is the intention to commit a crime. I don't think anywhere, because this is something which is a part of the criminal jurisprudence, a part of basic, rule of law. You can't give up that. Otherwise, on what basis you really book a person and say that he has committed a crime, like in somebody has committed murder? Intention has to be there. Now,
let me interrupt for a minute.
Right.
Let's take the attack on Indian Parliament. Let us say somebody knew that something was happening. He did not know that Parliament was being attacked and that somebody was a conduit, either passing on the explosive material or passing on a message. No, this person obviously is not guilty of knowing what's happening, but he's guilty of being a part of the terror ring. And if you say mens rea and therefore he is not waging war against Indian government and therefore he is not guilty of terrorism, you can never capture terrorists.
Actually, it's a question of understanding. The understanding is when the prosecution does the investigating machinery, they have to collect the evidence. Now, it is the evidence, whether it is of circumstantial nature or somebody's eyewitness, all those things have then to be put before the court. Now, what was said by my learned friend with regard to Rajiv Gandhi, now again the question is, if the investigating machinery or the prosecution doesn't bring up enough evidence before the court, what the court is supposed to do? And the other problem which was pointed out really related to the delay which happens in the court. So therefore, there are two areas in which we require some kind of, one is a proper kind of investigating machinery, the other one is delays which happen in the court. If we plug in these two things, then the question comes that you look at the law, where the law is lacking, and then do some kind of a reform which is
But just to point a simple thing, because when we talk about even TADA, let's talk about TADA in that case. A little chance of misuse, because every other law that we saw in that we see in India, it has always a chance of misuse as well. But it talks about having an eyewitness for so and so, for such and such a form of crime, and in fact having some humble citizen actually coming up and talking about, or in fact making his statement against some or the other terrorist group. Is it really possible to that extent at times? Because when we talk about system, when we're talking about a law, when we're talking about a present system, is it really possible in that case?
No, the difficulty is that in all these laws, TADA, POTA, etc., whatever, you define a terrorist area, and somebody is very innocent and he is having some kind of an arm, you book him under the terrorist law. The question is whether there was any intention in carrying that arm which you can connect with the terrorist activity, that he was carrying with a particular intention, otherwise an innocent person will also be caught. So the question is that we are supposed to look into all these TADA, POTA laws, and not just by going and saying that you make a confession statement. It becomes very easy. The police person will say, no, I cannot book him because there should be a confession statement. So therefore, what you are doing is that you are invading into the constitution and human rights of people, and then he will have a confessional statement without doing a proper kind of job, investigation and evidence, and that confessional statement ultimately will not be acceptable in the court.
Right.
He will, this is what is happening.
But
so we have to strengthen something, which is required to be done.
We have to strengthen a lot of things, in fact, including the system, which is the most important aspect. Well, right now our phone lines are open for you, as you know that in fact our toll-free numbers are 1-800-115313 and 1-800-115314. And right now we are also joined by one of our dedicated callers. In fact, he's calling from Gujarat, Mr. Pragnesh Shah. Well, Mr. Shah, please put forth your question or your comment. I would.
Thank you, Shalin.
Yeah, please carry on.
अब ये लोग ऐसा कहते हैं टाड़ा या पोटा जैसा जो कानून होता है
जी,
इसका मिसयूज होता है, इनोसेंट लोगों को पकड़े जाते हैं, लेकिन इनोसेंट जो पकड़े जाते हैं 2 साल या 5 साल के बाद वो छूट सकते हैं, लेकिन जो मरते हैं ऐसे टेररिस्ट एक्ट में वो तो इनोसेंट ही होते हैं, इनके लिए जिंदगी में कोई चांस नहीं रहता, वो तो केवल मर जाते हैं। दूसरी बात, अभी किसी ने बताया कि भाई जो राजीव गांधी की हत्या हुई तो ये केस चलाने में करीब 7 साल लग गए, 7 साल के बाद जजमेंट आया, लेकिन गुजरात में अक्षरधाम के बाद अक्षरधाम पे हमला हुआ तो पोटा का कानून था तो 2.5 साल में ये केस का जजमेंट आ गया, इन लोगों को फांसी की सजा हुई। तीसरी बात, गोधरा में जिन्होंने ट्रेन का डिब्बा जलाया था, अगर पोटा का कानून नहीं होता तो आज वो लोग बेल लेके छूट जाते और वो लोग और क्राइम करते, लेकिन वो लोग 6 साल से जेल में इसकी वजह से है कि पोटा जैसा कानून इनके पर लागू है। तो ये पोटा जैसा कानून होना चाहिए, अगर कुछ 2-5 निर्दोष भी इसमें फंसते तो ऐसा मानना चाहिए कि भाई चलो कोई बात नहीं, इनके लिए कुछ अलग से व्यवस्था कर देंगे, लेकिन जो मरते हैं वो तो निर्दोषी होते हैं, तो मरने वाले की सोचिए, इनके परिवार की सोचिए, जो पकड़े।
Thank you very much, Mr. Pragnesha. In fact, he was just reflecting the fire within a common man after the serious terrorist attacks that we have seen consecutively in the major hubs of our country. But just coming to you, Mr. Marwa, are the draconian laws, in fact, the answer to terrorism? That's what our
this word draconian itself misinforms public. There's a lot of talk about misuse of law. How do you stop misuse of a law? I have been in police service for a very long time, and I can tell you with my experience, there is not a law in our country which has not been misused. The solution to ensure that these laws are not misused, there is only one way to do it, and that is to find out who is guilty of doing that act and then punish him quickly and in an exemplary way. That is not being done. Scrapping all the laws is not the answer. It is said that POTA has or TADA has not stopped acts of terrorism, nor has Indian Penal Code, which has been in our country for the last over 100 years, has stopped crime. In fact, crime has increased. What we can all imagine sitting here, what would have happened if there was no Indian Penal Code? There would have been total anarchy and the rule of the law of the jungle. Now, that is what is happening today. We are not appreciating that terrorism is a very, very different crime which requires a different approach. And I entirely endorse Dr. Narayan that, what is at stake? At stake is the integrity of this country, the security of its citizens. And we can't quibble about technicalities and not do anything which needs to be done. Definition is not a problem. Everybody knows what terrorism is. One can, give our lawyers an opportunity to debate any law. You can have endless debate on that.
True.
But we all know what terrorism is, and it is possible to introduce safeguards in a law to ensure that they are not misused, and if they are misused, immediate and exemplary action is taken against.
Absolutely. It's the common man, in fact, who wants an answer today, doesn't want to really go into those intricacies, but want an answer to all the attacks that he is facing in the present time. We are joined by another caller from Mumbai, Mr. Rajendra Goyal. Well, Mr. Goyal, please put forth your question or comment.
Yeah, my question is, this is a terrorism which is specifically associated with Wahhabism, It is actually basically a pan-Islamic Caliphate. Their demand or their imagination, or what they feel that they can go for pan-Islamic Islamic Caliphate. The meaning of that is they will be Caliphates rule right from the Far East to Europe. That is what they dream. Their dream is not for just the next 10 years or 20 years or 50 years. It could be for a longer period.
Right.
It can be by any means that they want to achieve that. And for that, we have to join hands with the international community. And with that, we have to identify the real problem. The real problem is pan-Islamic Caliphate. The imagination for that. And we have to crush it at the base of that, because we have a very large Wahhabi community in this country. All these people whom you are catching there are basically their Bandi Wahhabis. None of them are Shia. None of them are Shia there. So we have to identify who are these Muslims. Muslims have got 72 sects. It is a particular Wahhabi sect of Muslims that is perpetuating all this.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Goel. Dr. Narayan.
I would like to caution Mr. Goel and many others one issue. I would maintain it's nothing to do with Islam. The vast majority of Islamic clerics are opposed to this kind of terror, including the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia itself, including almost all the clerics of India. Those who interpret the Quran and the Islamic jurisprudence, they are very categorical that jihad does not apply in these situations. These are simply mad people using the name of Islam and damaging the reputation of Islam. So we should not bring religion into that in that sense, though they are using that. The second is, it's always a small fringe element. And the point he made is very relevant in another sense. If it's political terrorism, because I want a Palestinian state, because I want an Irish state, or even a Kashmir state, or a Khalistan state, then you can address that problem. But if it is non-political, if it is non-temporal, if it is some peculiar theological solution that you have in mind, then modern world cannot deal with that. And there is no solution. Whatever be the alleged grievance, you have to put it down. There is no choice. If you don't understand that, if you pretend that there are some causes which are secular, which are temporal, which can therefore be addressed by a normal constitutional or political process, we will be grievously mistaken. In many ways, the crisis in this particular fringe of fanatics has coincided with modernity, when even a minor violence, but properly and strategically executed, could cause tremendous terror throughout the world. It could destroy the world. So we cannot afford to be complacent.
Absolutely, and
definitely that's... The difficulty arises when these people who are living in a world of fantasy are given support by people, on entirely mistaken grounds.
Right. So that's obviously one of those things that we draw out from this segment, but it's time now for a short break here. Lots more on this discussion after the break.